All right, well, it is 6:37. So I am going to turn this over. I'm going to turn this over to Jana. Hello, Jana.
Hey, hi. Never in my life have I felt like I've been on a game show except for tonight, waiting backstage for game to be done. So a couple things before we start. One of the hard things about a webinar is I can't see people's faces, but I've been stalking you all in the attendees list, so I can see you. So that's right, Ruthie, Jana in the green room. So I'm happy you're all here. I'm really excited about this series, partly because when I was in my ordination process, or even before that, I don't think I understood chaplaincy. I didn't know about it. And it was only because I had to take CPE that I got onto this track of chaplaincy. And it would have been really helpful for me as a person discerning my way forward in my call to know about chaplaincy and to know all the various places that it takes place. So we did this series last year and it was really well attended, and we decided to do it again and find some really distinct contexts where people do chaplaincy. So we're starting with military, which isn't like it's a really well-known venue for chaplaincy, but just as we were getting ready to, and I was talking to Joanne, there's so much about the military that's hidden from people who aren't in it. And I have known Joanne for a long time, and she and I are friends. And every time she talks to me about chaplaincy, I feel like I'm learning like a whole new, like a whole new profession. It's just completely different. So I'm excited to have her. So I'm going to introduce her kind of formally, which is really weird because I know Joanne, but Chaplain Colonel Joanne Martindale, and she even had to tell me how to do her title. Has served in the Army for 33 years, which is a long freaking time. She was born in Southern California, went to college in Southern California, and then went to divinity school in Princeton because she's fancy like that. But she also went to War College, which is just, to people outside the military, every time she tells me that, just sounds weird to me. I'm just going to own up to that. But Chaplain Joanne has served in places like Ground Zero after 9/11. She's a chaplain to Rwandan refugees, and she's told me stories out of that experience, which are fascinating and horrible all at the same time. And she was in Operation Iraq Freedom 3 as a support command chaplain. How'd I do? Is that right?
You did great, Jana.
Thank you. And she's highly decorated. Like, she has this whole list of awards, and I had to ask her, so of all those awards, like, which was the most important? So Joanne was awarded the Bronze Star, which she had to explain to me means that it's for meritorious service in a combat zone. Is that right?
That's correct.
Like a big deal. And she has one. So there's that. But most recently, the way I have known Joanne is she's served as a CPE supervisor at the medical center at Travis Air Force Base up in Northern California. And that's how I have come to know her and been friends. And I wrote this, if you read our blog post, the thing that's compelling to me about Joanne is she's known all of these terrible places and all of these terrible experiences, but she's the most buoyant, hopeful person that I know. So those two things sitting together for me are compelling. So I'm so happy you're here with us, Chaplain Joanne, and she's going to talk to us for a while, and then we're going to pepper her with questions and learn about her work. So thanks, Joanne, for being here.
Thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate the introduction. Hi, everybody. I wish I could see all of your faces, but I can only see a couple. So I will just know that you're out there. It is really an honor to be asked tonight to be your speaker. I am very excited about that. And I look forward to whatever questions that you have. Sometimes when I do a conversation, obviously questions come up. So write them down if you have them. I'm happy to answer them. So to give you a little bit of background about me, again, Janice said I've been in the Army 33 years. At the moment, I'm the only, there's actually two of us, two female chaplain colonels in the Army Reserve. So as many of you probably know, there's the active duty Army, where those are full-time military folks, where the Army moves you every 2 to 3 years around different missions in the country. They're full-time. Then you have the Reserve, which are part-time, and the National Guard, which is part-time. I'm in the Reserve. So I started out, though, in the New Jersey Army National Guard in 1990. in the middle of Desert Storm and Desert Shield. I was a brand new person coming in. I had a civilian job because I was a civilian chaplain. And then I decided, you know what, I want to join the Army. I have a brother who was a surgeon actually in Operation Iraq, in Desert Storm. And so he wrote me one time while he was serving there. He said, you know, Joanne, here I'm doing operations and all this kind of thing, but you know, I really think you should be a chaplain here. You'd be amazing. You know, so I was like, oh, didn't think about that too much. And then I had a boss who also was serving as a chaplain in my civilian job in the Army. And I thought, you know what, maybe I could try that. So I raised my hand on November 14th, 1990, and joined the military. Again, I joined it first in the New Jersey Army National Guard, which in the National Guard, as you probably maybe or maybe don't know, usually their missions are within the state. So at the time I was living in New Jersey and the missions were in the state. But then there was the first time since the Korean War that the National Guard was activated, and that was for Iraq. But let me back up a little bit to tell you, you know, kind of where it began. So when I decided to join the military, you know, a lot of people were like, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to serve in the military? And I really said, you know, I want to serve in chaplaincy with people who may not go to church or synagogue or whatever, you know, just regular folks that are serving, but may not even don the doors of a church or synagogue or mosque. So I really like the idea of more inclusivity and like the idea of, you know, serving kind of with the masses. So I decided, let me try that. But I did not know at that time that I would be sent immediately after basic training to Walter Reed for 5 months, because there was a lot of people coming back and families needed help. There's a lot of death. And so they needed chaplains to deal with the death, talk with the families, that kind of thing. So I right away went to basic training. And in my basic training back in 1990, first of all, there's not as many women in the chaplain corps as men. So in my Army basic training, there's 137 men and 7 women. And in that basic training, you know, they treat you like a regular grunt, even though they were all chaplains, and they treated you, as you can kind of imagine. I won't use the colorful language, but you know, they wanted to get all, so they would say there were 7 of us women. So they'd say, I want all the women to come down front, and they would try to haze you and get you out. And the drill sergeant would say, I don't think women should be in the military, be in the chaplaincy. That's ridiculous. A lot of times you had peers that also didn't want you in as a woman. Maybe they didn't believe in women in the ministry. So back in 1990, that was a bigger deal than it is now. I didn't really have any role models back then, 33 years ago, very few that were women. You know, so that was interesting. So for the first week, 4 women dropped out of the 7. 3 of us remained from that class. And funny enough, all 3 of us years and years later all became colonels. So that's a higher rank. It's kind of the rank right below general. So it's a relatively high rank. So that was kind of exciting that, you know, 3 of us stayed in all that time and became colonels. So, but I'll give you a little bit of history about my military career. So I went to Desert Storm. Desert Storm, Desert Shield was going on. I went to Walter Reed. I stayed there 5 months. But then after that, I went back to my civilian job. So I was a chaplain at Trenton Psychiatric Hospital for the first 10 years of my career. And then I was the director of chaplaincy at the largest state hospital in New Jersey, at a place called Ancora Psychiatric Hospital in Hamilton, New Jersey. And I was there 15 years as the director. And I supervised 15 chaplains of different faiths and provided spiritual care for the 865 patients there. So I have 25 years in state psychiatric hospital experience. So that's kind of my chaplaincy experience. But during those times, I was called to active duty different times during my career. First time was at Walter Reed. The next time was in 96. I'm sure some of you remember the genocide in Rwanda. A lot of men and children were murdered in front of women. And so different states gave asylum to women. And so New Jersey gave asylum to 386 women. And when they got to Fort Dix, New Jersey, they were asking for a female holy woman. They wanted someone who was spiritual and religious to listen to the pain that they had endured. I was by no means by myself during that time. There were other professionals that were helping them assimilate, because they did not have a home back home, and all their families, a lot of them had been murdered. So They were asking for a female holy woman. I said, I was the only female chaplain in the state of New Jersey at the time. And so I got a call from the governor's office to say, is this Chaplain Martindale? I said, yes. And we have a mission for you. And I said, what's that? And make a long story short, I went for 5 months and helped out listening to the stories of the Rwandan refugees. And obviously, as you can imagine, that was probably one of the most difficult assignments I've ever had, because the vicarious trauma was unbelievable. I hadn't heard some of those kinds of stories. And I was married and had 2 little boys at the time. My kids, let's see, in 96, they were 1 and 3. So, it was tough to listen all day to the stories of horror that the women had gone through and been through themselves, watching often their families die in front of them, and the things, of course, that happened to them, and then go home and be with my own children, very kind of difficult. During that time, I wasn't as boundaried as I am now, and as old or wise. And so I decided, oh, you know what a good idea. Let me do 4 groups a day, 2 hours apiece. So I did 4 groups, 2 hours apiece, which was, anyone that would know anything now would say, you are crazy. Okay. I probably was back then, but I didn't know it. So all to say, that was really hard to listen to people for 8 hours a day, that kind of trauma. Took me a long time to kind of recover from that. After that 5 months, I was having lunch with another female pastor, and she was talking, we were just having lunch, and she said to me, Joanne, what's the last thing I just said to you? And I said, what? I don't know what you're saying. She goes, right, you're not listening to a word I'm saying. There's something going on with you. I'm going to take you to my counselor right now, because you can't focus. You don't know what's going on, So sometimes we don't realize vicarious trauma when it hits us or when we need to go. And I certainly, after that kind of period of 5 months, needed to download a lot of the stories that I had heard with a counselor, which was very, very helpful. After Rwandan refugees, of course, there was ground zero, and all the New Jersey and New York National Guard chaplains were activated for federal service during that time. And on 9/11, I was at Ancora Psychiatric Hospital, which was my civilian job, just there like everyone else is in their jobs. And I was there, and I heard about the planes crash, and I got a call from my commanding officer who said, Joanne, right now you're activated for federal service. Go home from your civilian job, put on your military dress blues. You have 2 assignments. The first assignment you are to be given, and then he said, your chaplain assistant will be waiting for you at your house to drive you to the first place. The first place is a school. And I was to tell a 9-year-old boy, an 8-year-old girl, they lost their mother. So that was one of them. And so I went to the school. I went to the children were in the principal's office, which was probably not the best place for them. They didn't do anything wrong, but that's where they brought them in. And I basically sat them down. I sat on the floor with them and said, I'm sorry to inform you, your mother died today in an accident that happened in our world, and explained it. And the little girl said, that can't be possible. I just made peanut butter and jelly sandwich with my mom this morning. And so also what happened that day was that the principal knew enough, because their father had died 6 months prior to that in a car accident, and they did not have any grandparents or anything like that. So the principal knew to call the mother's best friend. So she was also there in the room while I was talking to them. She and her fiance at the time ended up adopting those 2 children because they didn't have anywhere to go. So now I usually talk to them every year on 9/11. Early on, I said, do you want me to call you? And they said, you're so helpful to us, Chaplain. Please keep calling. So that's pretty neat. So we have a great relationship. They're great young people right now. But so that was huge that day, going to the school. And then after I left there, I was to go to a home and to tell a woman about her loss. And so I was in my dress blues. And when you would do an informing of someone who died, you get in your dress blue uniform. And I was walking up the driveway to the porch, and a woman came out on the porch and said, Chaplain, how many of my 3 children died today? You wouldn't be here unless one of them died. And I said, ma'am, do you mind if I come up and sit on the porch? She had a porch swing. She said, sure. So I came up and I sat with her on the porch swing. I sat on the swing, and she sat right next to me and grabbed my hand. And she said, how many of my 3 children? I said, I'm sorry, ma'am, all 3. So all three of her children, 2 in Tower 1 and 1 in Tower 2, they all passed away. So she didn't say anything. She started bawling, and I kept her from falling on the ground, and I held her for an hour without saying anything, because any good CPE student knows, get out of the way. Don't get your words or yourself in the way of their grief, right? So I held her. After maybe about 45, 50 minutes, she said to me out of the blue, "Chaplain, do you cook?" I said, "What?" "What?" And I said, "Not well. Why?" And she said, "Because this week I had a premonition to buy all my children's favorite foods. So I bought fettuccine and meatballs and, whatever." So she said, "Would you help me cook their favorite food?" She was an Italian woman, and she needed to cook. That was what she needed to do. So I said, "Yes, ma'am, I'm happy to do that." So we got up, she put an apron on my dress blue uniform, and she started chopping onions, and we started making all three of her kids' favorite foods, at which point she brought out photo albums. We started to look at them. We started talking about her 3 kids, and then her husband got home. And I said, "Do you want to tell him, or do you want me to?" And she said, "Please, Chaplain, you do that." I told him, and then he fell on the couch, and I stayed for a while, but then their friends, they live in a very tight community, Italian community, and they were all coming over and bringing food and talking, and then I left. So those were the first 2 things I did on 9/11, and then I went home to my own children and tried to explain it to them, of course. Anyway, so that's kind of what we went from. I went from ground zero to Iraq. That was in 2004 and 2005. I spent 545 days. I was on orders for Iraqi Freedom 3, which just means the 3rd rendition of it. So, and I went to Forward Operating Base. They call it FOB, Forward Operating Base Spiker, in Tikrit, Iraq. I was the Division Support Command Chaplain, and I was in charge of 15 male chaplains, half of which didn't believe in women in the ministry or in the service. So that's, of course, always difficult when you're the senior ranking woman. I was a lieutenant colonel, and they were all in ranks beneath me. And so I was in charge of them. But I knew quickly on I had to let them know that we have to be a team here. It's not going to work. So I essentially brought them all together, and I had some of them that were like this, like, what's she going to say, kind of thing. They were not thrilled that I was going to be their senior chaplain. And I said, "Gentlemen, we are here for a mission. We have 8,300 soldiers on Forward Operating Base Spiker, and we are 16 chaplains for 8,300 on this base." I said, "People are going to come with us with all kinds of things. We're going to do memorial ceremonies. We're going to do counseling, worship services, the whole thing. I need to know that I have a team. And if you cannot work with me as a female, if you cannot do the mission that you are called to do here in Iraq, you just let me know, and I will send you somewhere else, and I will get someone else to take your place. Because if we can't have a team, it's not going to work. So I'm going to give you a period of time to leave. And if you need to leave, you just let me know. But if you stay, what I expect from you is to be a team player, to not talk about someone behind their back if they're a different religion, a different gender, a different, faith, whatever it is. If they're conservative and you're liberal and whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Those things don't matter here. What does matter is the 8,300 people that we are chaplains for. That's what matters. I honestly thought they were all going to walk out. I really did. I thought, oh, this is going to be a busy time to try to get 15 new chaplains. None of them walked out. And they didn't. I said, "This is your time. You can walk out," and they didn't walk out. And I said, "Well, what you're doing then, if you stay, means that you have each other's back." I said, "Because somebody's going to go to you as a male clergy, that they're never going to come to me. Somebody might come to me, maybe they've been raped or something. They're not going to go to you." So we all have different gifts and abilities. And if you're staying, that means you're going to work as a team. I said, and what I don't want is people talking about each other's backs. It's going to be hard enough doing the ministry. We don't need chaplains stabbing each other in the back for a different religious belief or gender or whatever it is. So they all stayed, and we worked together as a team. At the very end of the 545 days, I had several of them say, "Ma'am, I would work for you anytime." And I think what they meant by that is not because I'm so great, and believe me, I'm more than human. It means that I'm fair. I went to all their worship services. I support them. I had their backs. I tried to do things when they needed something. I visited them. I made sure they were okay. They're my team. So that was great. So after so when I went to Iraq, my children were 9 and 10. So my husband and was there, of course, and then my two boys, 9 and 10 at the time. So obviously that's really hard. It was hard for me being away from them for that long. I mean, that was very difficult. But I did obviously come back. So you may or may not know this, but every chaplain does not carry a weapon. Chaplains are non-combatants. With the Geneva Convention, you do not carry arms. But you do have a chaplain assistant, used to be called, now it's called religious affairs specialist, who carries a weapon and protects you in combat. So my chaplain assistant, it was called at the time, his job is to protect me. So every time we went outside the wire, they call it, or outside the base, it was his job to protect me, make sure I didn't die. He protected me several times, saved my life 3 times. One time because there was a rocket that came in and I didn't hear it. It was, you could hear it. And he pushed me down and jumped on top of me. He got some shrapnel in his back, and he saved my life. Another time we were in a helicopter and we only had a few minutes before we had to jump in the helicopter and leave the base before people were going to start shooting at us. And so he literally lifted me up, put me on the floor of the helicopter, jumped on top of me. And just as that happened, they started shooting at our helicopter. And you could hear the ping, ping, ping around the helicopter. And he was over me to help. And another time he got in front, basically protected me so that I didn't get hit by firing that was coming at our way. So, he obviously saved my life. So he's a family friend for life. When I got home and my boys were 9 and 10 and they hadn't seen me for 545 days, I got there and Chaplain, Anthony was right there. And I said to my children who were smaller, right? Anthony's 6'3". So I said to them, hey boys, Anthony saved my life. And my oldest son looked up at him and said, thank you for saving my mom's life, Anthony. And he said, absolutely. They picked him, scooped them both up, 9 and 10, scooped them up and said, I'll have her back at any time. So, the relationships that you make in combat are huge, people that have each other's back and that kind of thing. So then that was Iraq, certainly came back to my civilian job after that. And then later on down the road, I went to Germany for 3.5 years. I was the support command chaplain there. They call it kind of family life chaplain equivalent. Did a lot of counseling because I have a master's in marriage and family counseling from Fuller Theological Seminary, and then the master's of divinity from Princeton. And then later on in my career, you're selected to go to United States Army War College, which is the kind of the place you go for a 2 years distance learning master's when they see potential in you as a general officer. And so I was selected that year. There was only 5 chaplains selected, and I was one of them to go and to take that. It was a very, very hard course, very difficult, especially for chaplains. JAGs, that's lawyers and doctors, are the only 3 professions that stay in their job. So chaplains can't be anything other than a chaplain. Lawyers can't be anything other than a lawyer, and same with doctors. And so you are always a doctor. You just rotate units. So, but I was in a great cohort of 16 and we learned a lot together over that period of time. So, and then in there somewhere, I became a CPE supervisor. So that happened too. So now my job is I'm the chief of chaplains for the VA in Northern California. I have 5 chaplains in the VA that I supervise at Sacramento, California, Martinez, California, and David Grant Medical Center on Travis Air Force Base. For the last 10 years, I've been the CPE supervisor at David Grant Medical Center on Travis Air Force Base. I'm also happen to be Presbyterian, and on Sunday mornings, I preach at First Presbyterian Church of Napa. So I love the church too. I love chaplaincy. I love the Army chaplaincy. I think for me, my son said it best. My sons are now 28 and 29. My husband passed in 2007, but my sons are 28 and 29. I remember my younger son, Ryan, said to me one time, we were on a cruise because we like to travel. And at the end of this cruise, we had dinner with, people we'd never met or whatever. And he came back to the room and he said, Mom, I noticed that you always introduce yourself as an Army chaplain, even though you've been a hospice chaplain before, you've been a VA chaplain, you've been, hospital chaplain, whatever, psych hospital, but you always say you're an Army chaplain. Why is that? And I said, it's a really good question. But I think the answer is I'm really proud of the work I've done. I feel like when I am in uniform, when I serve in the Army, it's really in times where it's a crisis for our country, in war and 9/11 and Rwandan refugees and Iraq. I mean, these are times where soldiers really need a chaplain. They need someone to come alongside them and companion them in times where it's very, very difficult you're missing your families, you're away, all kinds of things happen in war. Some things you expect, some things you don't. I remember one time I was helping an enlisted soldier in Iraq. She was having a hard time with physical training, and she was just having a problem. She said, "Chaplain, if you just walk with me a couple of miles occasionally, it would just give me some help." I said, "Sure." So in the morning, I walked with her. I had been doing that for months, and one day I would then go to the staff meeting right after that. So I was walking with this young woman, and she had two young girls, a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. And she was about to leave. She'd already been there a year, and she was going home in 2 days. And she was getting so excited to have her, one of her daughters, like pony party or, something like that. She was getting excited, talking about what she's going to get. And so we were talking about that. And then we went our separate ways. She got a shower here. I went over to my area, went a shower, and then I showed up at the meeting where at 8 a.m. where we talk about the people who had died the day before, what's going on, what's the mission. And I remember walking in that room, and I sat in my normal seat where it says chaplain, where all the staff officers sit. And I remember they named off the people that had died that day or the day before, and they named her name. And I stood up and I said, "Excuse me, I just walked with her this morning. Like, you've got this wrong." And they said, "No, she was killed this morning. And about 10 minutes after I said goodbye to her, she was killed by a direct rocket fire." And I was just so shocked. I had to walk out, and I ended up having to do her funeral. So I did 26 funerals in Iraq, and I supervised all of my chaplains, all 15 did multiple funerals as well. So, there's things like that. I mean, there's a lot of other stories I have about, vehicles blowing up right in front of me and, difficult things. So there's just a lot of trauma. And you just try to do the best you can in the time frame you're given and with the people you're with. You try to just be a loving presence, be a caring presence, but sometimes you have to go back to your own CHU. They called it containerized housing unit. It's like a little refrigerated box that you stay in for officers in Iraq. And you go back and you just cry because you can't put it all together. So it's tough because in Iraq, it was, you start the morning at 5 or 6 and you end at 10 or 11. And I had 2 hours off a week. I had Sunday from 1 to 3, 2 hours off for 545 days. So it was another level of, you really see what you're made of when you're in war. So that's a little bit about my story. Right now I'm in the reserve still. I have another 1.5 years that I'll be in the military, and then I'll be retiring. I work for the Chief of Chaplain's office as a strategic engagement officer. Right now in the Army Chaplain Corps, there's about 95% men, about maybe 5% women. And so they're trying to get women and minorities, diversity in the Army Chaplain Corps, because there's not very many, like of me, there's not very many women, and there's certainly not many women at the top that have made colonels. So I was supposed to retire at 60. I'm 62. And they keep extending me. "Please, ma'am," they say, "you have to stay. We need you to stay." So I've stayed for a couple of years, but next year will be my last year. It'll be September 30th. Next year I'll retire after a wonderful career. And I could actually answer my son when he said, "Mom, why do you always choose Army chaplain to introduce yourself?" And I think it's because I felt very passionate about the work I do. I love what I do in the civilian world too. I've worked with psych for 25 years, the VA. I've done some hospice. I've done some Presbyterian church work. I've done a little bit of CPE supervisor. I've done a little bit of everything, but I think I really have enjoyed my time as an Army chaplain. I really have felt God using me. And also you find out what you're made of. You find out what you're made of in the middle of a combat zone. So that's what I have. Thanks for listening.
Hey, thanks, Chaplain Joanne. when I was listening to you talk, the question that kept coming to my mind as like you're describing these really intense places
Right.
and conversations, and you're in the reserve. So there's got to be this back and forth, right? Like you're dipping into all this intensity and then you're
Sure.
moving back into your life, not just like your children, but like ordinary life of grocery shopping. And I'm wondering, like, how do you manage that toggling back and forth?
That's a great question, Jana. I think that sometimes well and sometimes not well. I remember when I got back from Iraq and my husband and I were just at a farmer's market getting some food or something. And all of a sudden I heard this pop, and it was just a car backing up. But to me, it sounded like weapons. So I hit the ground. I did what I was normal to me after Iraq. You hear gunfire, you hit the ground. So I literally hit the ground. Everybody in the farmer's market was looking around like, what's the matter with this lady? She's on the ground. My husband said, it's okay, honey, you're not in Iraq anymore. And then he helped me up. And everybody around me is like, she went to Iraq. And I'm like, he's like, yeah, she just got back from after 545 days. And literally they just start clapping, and it just feels really weird. You also feel a bit overwhelmed when you come back because it's, all you have is one suitcase, right? And a couple of uniforms. Like you don't have a bunch of stuff. And when you come back, I remember going into a Walmart, and I stayed about 5 minutes, and I was overwhelmed with the amount of people and the amount of stuff and the amount of colors. It was all overwhelming. So I don't like 4th of July because I don't like the popping sounds. It reminds me of all the weapons and the people shooting at us. I mean, every day they would shoot at our base. And so you'd wake up every day hearing gunfire. So some of those things, you just can't disassociate it. I also, when I see trash on the street, I go around it in my vehicle because in Iraq, trash sometimes meant IEDs, meant explosions that hide trash. It hid in a trash. So, some of those things you can't really, they're just with you. So, yeah.
The other thing I think about this when you have told me stories before, but how do you configure hope? One of the questions that I wrestle with as a chaplain is the relationship between optimism and hope. And I wondered, I don't need an answer, but just what comes to mind when you think about what hope means in the middle of all that?
It's such a good question. I think I would answer it differently at different times in my life, right? Sometimes hope to me in Iraq was a hope to get home. I just wanted to get home safe. And I wanted to take as many people as I could along with me. Hope was getting home safely to families, or hope was providing encouragement in the middle of a very difficult environment. I remember one time our base, the water supply was blown up and we didn't have enough water. And so I remember the commander was like, Chaplain, you got to say a speech or something on the loudspeaker because people are hoarding their water. They're not sharing, and we need water for, whatever. And I just came on the loudspeaker and didn't know what I was going to say. And I basically said, I have 2 sons at home, and if they were in the hospital, I'd want all of us to share. I want all of us to get home. But in order to do that, we all have to band together. We have to bring together what we have because it's going to be another day before we'll get our water. And so we need to, so you just have to kind of provide hope. You have to provide reason for folks to help other people because, some of our, we want to just take what we have and go, sometimes you have to be another voice to them. So.
We have there's a couple questions in the Q&A, and one, they're sort of related. One is about asking, like, you listen to all these people and like, where do you go, right, for your sense, like for help? And another is asking about practices or let me make sure I say it correctly, like self-care practices that have helped you.
Yeah, no, another great question. So again, those change over your lifetime. So I think when I got home from Iraq, I went to a counselor immediately because I knew I had so much stuff to deal with. And I was like, at that point, I'd been in my career for a while and I knew I just needed to see a counselor. So different times in my life, I'll see a counselor once a week, twice a week, once a month, depends on what else is going on, right? Because I think when you care for other people, you should also be in counseling. That's my personal opinion. People might say differently, but I think, it's important for me to be in counseling once a month at this time in my life because I need someone to listen to my pain because I listen to so many people's pain, right? After the Rwandan refugees, I saw a counselor 3 times a week for a year and a half. That's because that was the most difficult time for me. And all the things I listened to were evil. I mean, outside the box, hard. And so I needed more counseling at that point. Now in my life, I do counseling, spiritual direction, spiritual director.
Yeah.
I walk every Saturday morning. I just need to get out and walk for like 5 miles, 6 miles, 7, whatever I feel like doing. I'm going to take a vacation this coming Monday night.
I was just going to say, you travel. What are you talking about?
Do.
If
I
you
travel
see
a
Joanne
lot.
on Facebook. Yep.
I have 2 sons, and one of them loves to travel. So he and I are going on a cruise starting Monday night from Singapore to Dubai. So, I love to travel. He and I have been to 7 continents. So we enjoy that. And that's kind of where I get away and I re-up kind of, I clear my head, read some books, have a sea day, but normally it can be kind of intense. So I try to be good about self-care. Sometimes I'm better than at other times. After Rwanda, I don't think I even knew what was going on because I was too overwhelmed, and I had to have someone else tell me I needed self-care because I wasn't good at it, but I'm better at it now. Yeah. And then I have great friends, great girlfriends, great guy friends, great people I can call. I've got Gianna, I've got different people I can call and say, can you listen to my stuff? Because this isn't making sense to me. And she'll say, sure, I got your back. I'll listen. So I have some wonderful friends that will do that for me.
So there's a couple other questions.
Sure.
One is, did you ever minister to people who were not traditional believers or people of no faith at all? And
absolutely.
Like how what was that like for you, or what is that like for you as a chaplain?
First of all, I love it. I mean, I love ministering to anybody, right? So in the military, I mean, you never know who's going to come in your door, who's going to need something. Someone said to me at the beginning of my tour, I'm never talking to you because I'm an atheist. I said, that's fine. You don't have to talk to me. I said, but I'm still going to go by your desk and ask how you're doing. You don't have to answer me, but I'm still going to see how you're doing. He goes, do you think you're my chaplain? And I was like, well, I'm the chaplain assigned to this unit. You don't have to call me your chaplain, but I'm the chaplain for the unit. So I'm still going to come by. Well, one time I went by his desk in Iraq and I said, I bet you are going to lose to me in ping pong. Let's just see if you can. He goes, no, I'm going to beat you in ping pong. I go, no, I doubt it. And I go, why don't you put your money where your mouth is, right? So we went up and played ping pong and I killed him at ping pong because I was good in ping pong. So, and the whole time I'm like, I played you in ping pong, you lost. Maybe you come to church once. He goes, that's BS. I was like, you kind of owe me, like I beat you in ping pong. He's like, all right, Chaplain, I'll do it once. He went once and he loved the community and the camaraderie and the people, and he never missed a church service again. So, you just don't know, like, I mean, I minister to Druids, people that don't believe, Wiccans, I mean, everybody, right? I don't treat anyone different because they have faith or don't have faith. In the Army, we do perform and provide. So like if you're a priest, you're performing sacrament of the sick. I can't do that. I'm not a priest. So I'll get a priest for you. But sometimes I can provide counseling or, whatever. So it's a pretty wonderful ministry. I've enjoyed it very much. And I'm pretty passionate about it. And soon it's going to come to an end. And, that's okay too. Because I'm tired. I'm okay to give it up to other people. I just went a couple of months ago to a female Army chaplain conference where there was, just under 100 women from all over the place. And they're kind of lone rangers, the women out there, because there are not many of them, right? And they're always put with 2 or 3 men. And not all chaplains treat female chaplains well. Okay, because they still don't believe in women in the ministry or whatever. So they sometimes get, a headache because of some of this and the way they're treated. Right. And I was the keynote speakers on a panel. I was a speaker. I was a preacher, this kind of stuff. And so many of them are like, man, thank you so much for being here. Like, how did you do it? How did you make it through with all these guys and the pressure and the Army? And I said, you don't look to get any medals. You don't look to do any of that. You don't care about your medals. Put them in a drawer. No one cares. What you should care about is doing the best you can in a given situation for a soldier. And that's it. If you do that over and over and over again, you're going to rise. You're going to rise up, it's not about you. Get out of the way. It's not about your ribbons. Put them in a drawer. No one cares. If you start caring about your ribbons and your combat patches and all this stuff, you have lost your perspective as a chaplain. So anyway, thanks for the question.
Yeah, no. So there's another question from Jessica. She wants to know, how do you navigate your role as a spiritual leader while addressing the unique challenges faced by female service members, considering the military's predominantly male-dominated environment with its potential impact on their spiritual well-being?
It's a great question. I'm going to give you a story, and if I don't answer it, you let me know, and I'll try it again. I was at a senior leader conference. I was the only female chaplain there. They were all men, and I was getting some coffee in a break room, and a lieutenant colonel, male, comes up to me, a colonel, right? Lieutenant colonel is below a colonel, so I was above him in rank. And he said to me, he looked at me, he said, some people might think you slept your way to the top. And he said that to me. And I'm a cool CPU supervisor, right? Nothing affects me, right? So kidding. So I said to him, what do you think? Do you think I slept my way to the top? And he goes, well, I don't know. I'm just asking. I mean, some people think you're a full bird colonel. Like, how'd you get there? And I said, well, you know what? I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask this whole group what they think. And he goes, what? I said, I'm going to go ask the leader if I can speak. I'm going to ask all of them what they think about that. He's like, no, that's okay. That's okay. No, I said, no, seriously, I'm just going to go ask him. So I go up to the leader and I said, hey, Alan, I wonder if I could have a couple minutes just to speak. I'm the only female chaplain colonel here. I'd like to, speak. And he says, sure, Joanne. Yeah, go ahead. I said, okay. So after the break, everyone comes back and I said, hey, gentlemen, because it was all men in the room, all male chaplains, right? It was probably over 150 of them. And I said, how many of you supervise female soldiers? And about half of them raised their hand. I said, well, something just happened to me in the hallway, and I just want to run it by you, see what you think. And so they're like, oh, okay. So I said, this person said, some people might think you slept your way to the top, as he's looking at me. And some people gasp, like, what? How could someone say that? And other people are like, oh, okay. Like, oh, okay. So I said, if someone's saying that to me, a full bird colonel, one below general, right? How much more are they going to say that to the, to the first lieutenant, captain, whatever, female? Right. If this guy's going to say it to me. And then some people are like, well, who was it? Who said it? Whatever. And I said, no. I said, this chaplain gives one chance and leaves with grace. I said, so I will give this soldier one chance to know he did something wrong, and I will give grace once. But if he ever does something like that again, I'll write him up and he'll be out of the Army. Because you can't say that, obviously, right?
Right.
So,
but I love that, Joanne. I mean, it's like you both called him out and you called it out. Like it's a larger problem systematically than just that one behavior. Yeah.
That's it. And I mean, that's it. Whenever you're a female in the Army Chaplain Corps, everyone watches you walk in, right? So here's another example. I'm at a all.
Wait. I want to ask another question because it's related.
Go ahead.
So someone's asking, what was it like to be a chaplain during Don't Ask, Don't Tell, right? Which is related, right? Because it's this systematic issue.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, there's the better person to speak about that than me is a 2-star woman named Tammy Smith and her wife, Tracy. They are good friends of mine. And she's a retired 2-star general. And she speaks about Don't Ask, Don't Tell, because when she went in the military, she couldn't say she was a lesbian. Right. And then in the military, she decided while she was in and she was a 1-star to come out in front of everyone as a 1-star general. And she did it masterfully. Right. And, that was through the appeal and all this kind of stuff. And she goes around the country now talking about what that was like for her and Don't Ask, Don't Tell and how she was treated before, how she was treated differently, where she speaks now. I mean, she and her wife are just absolutely amazing humans. She would be better to answer that. If you look her up, Tammy Smith, LGBTQ, her name will come all up. Right. And you can read things she's written and things like that. She's just an amazing, one of my role models.
But I feel curious though, as a chaplain during that time where there's this issue where it's sort of something that soldiers are being required to hide, right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I feel curious about not just that, but a chaplain's role in that environment of holding perceived dangerous information, right? I wonder, I don't know. I wonder about your role of people telling you about their
Sure.
depression that could compromise their standing. I don't know. I mean,
They
do,
did. I mean, they did talk to me about not feeling safe.
mm,
Obviously, they can't be themselves. They can't feel safe. Beforehand, they would say, I have to hide a piece of me, and I
mm,
would say, you do in the military if you want to stay in, but you don't have to hide with me. Do you know what I mean?
mm,
So I've
right.
met with many couples who are gay, and I told them, once this is appealed, I'll do your weddings. Do you know?
Mm, yeah.
And I've helped many a soldier, lesbian and gay, get married in Army chapels. I mean,
Mm,
all kinds of stuff.
mm,
Marriage and family enrichment retreats that are traditionally for heterosexual couples. I'm one of the chaplains that will always do they always will pull me in to do the same sex marriage enrichment retreats.
mm,
So I just think it was such a difficult time because people had to be in hiding. And all I could do was be an open, friendly, inclusive, and speak out in other chaplain arenas where people were very anti.
mm,
It's easier now, but it's still hard sometimes because there's still
yeah.
biases. So,
No, I mean, for sure, right? It's a very, I mean, I don't know, but just describing how it is for you as a woman,
sure.
it's sort of incredibly misogynistic in all of
Exactly.
the ways. And I just am like, I'm struck, Joanne, like you, I would, how are you not bitter? I would feel so embittered and so angry. Everyone listening who knows me is not surprised to hear me ask this question. I would be like I would come on here and be like, those people in the army. And you are never like that. Like, this is not a front. Like, anyway. So how are you not bitter?
Never thought about it quite in the ways. I mean, I think earlier in my career, I was more angry because I had more things to be angry about. Later in my career as a full bird, when you walk into a room of recruits, they stand at attention when you walk in. There's a
Mm,
different amount of kind of power that you have now in the
mm,
military.
right.
And I can intervene for people and soldiers in ways now as a colonel that I could never do back then. But I think
Mm,
I'm not bitter because at least now in my more mature person, right, I would say it's not my problem, it's theirs. It's
mm,
not my problem. I mean, you can't, as we say in the military, you can't fall on your sword for
mm,
every battle, or otherwise you'd be dead and full of holes, right? I mean, you have to pick
right.
the battles that you want to fight and fight them well and have the knowledge behind you to fight the battle well. Right now in the Army, I'm the subject matter expert for military sexual trauma in the Army. So I speak at the Pentagon about 3 times a year. I speak in the UN in Belgium. I speak kind of all over about MST, military
Mm,
sexual trauma, because that's taken many years to get right. It's
mm,
still not right, but it's better than it
right.
was. It used to have rules where commanders could make decisions as to who gets tried and who doesn't. Now that doesn't happen. When a
Mm,
woman's raped, then a third party comes in, assesses that it's out of the commander's hands. It
right.
used to be that, if they had, notches on there, like someone was raped and they made a report, that looks bad on the commander. So of course they didn't
Mm,
want to, have it go forward. Now some of that procedure is taken out of that. So there's a lot of things that are better, but they're not perfect.
right.
But I guess
Well, and
I always had optimism, right? I guess I'm a optimistic person.
well, I mean, I don't want to answer for you, but I kind of am. You and I had breakfast one time, and I was, again, to the surprise of nobody, sort of worked up about a particular
Uh,
set of circumstances. And I remember you saying to me, Jenna, there's something for you to learn here. These people are not going to change. And so
right.
either you can become a student of what you need to learn here, or this will be just maddening and nothing else.
That's true.
And that felt to me like a lesson, like I got a free lesson from your experience, right, of being a woman
Uh,
in the military. I want to get to a couple more questions.
sure,
One is,
sure. Go for it.
did you and your team feel the need to minister to each other?
In Iraq. So myself and the 15 men, was that the
I
question?
assume so. The
Okay.
person doesn't designate.
Do we feel the need to minister to each other? I think that each chaplain found their own way of getting ministry for themselves. Sometimes it was in a staff meeting where we would all get together. We would do that every week, but we had such different kinds of people that they didn't all mesh exactly. So they weren't always each other's support system, right?
Right.
But they all found, at my encouragement, I encouraged them to find 2 or 3 people that they trust, that they can be themselves with. Because if you don't have anyone to be yourself with in combat, while people are shooting at you and you're ministering for crazy hours per day, you're beyond burned out. And no one cares if you're burned out in combat. They just keep expecting you to do your job. So you have to find people that you care about. So every Sunday for myself, I had a group of 6 people who were my buddies, nurse, a doctor, different people. And this one nurse, whose name is Lisa, she's amazing. Her mother would send her pancake batter and syrup as care packages. And she would make pancakes for us every Sunday from 1 to 3. And they would station someone outside the door, because these were 6 kind of important people in the command, and people would be, interrupting them every 5 minutes. They stationed someone at the door, do not interrupt these 6 people for 2 hours. And we would have pancakes together and tell jokes and unleash what was going on in ourselves, how we could manage it, how we could make it. And those are the people that helped me in Iraq, as well as a friend named Meredith and my chaplain assistant, Anthony, and, some other people. But I encourage the chaplains to find people.
Are there people from that time in your life that you still, still go back to, and it's like you're touching this point of like, I don't want to say woundedness, but intensity that sort of nobody else understands?
Absolutely. Every Memorial Day and Veterans Day, I get a joint text with the commander, who still says, "I'm so proud of all of you for serving in Iraq. You were a wonderful team." So he just, and then Staff Sergeant, the Anthony, every time I go to New Jersey, I visit he and his wife. They're like family to me. My roommate Rena, we still talk. She and her wife are good friends of mine. We talk. So just a lot of different people that were very important to me back then, still are. Sometimes I'll get a text from someone in Iraq saying, do you still play ping pong? Because that was one of my releases. I played ping pong in the NWR, morale, welfare, whatever place. And we would play ping pong, and I loved it. I think there was an article written about me, the chaplain beats the devil out of soldiers, with a picture of me doing ping pong. So it was kind of funny, but anyway.
It is, and troubling. I just need to say, funny and a little troubling. I'm not going to lie.
It was a joke, Jan. It was a joke.
All right. We are at time. So Joanne, thank you so much for coming. And seriously, thank you for your generosity. I learned stuff. It was great. So next week, Joanne, thank you. You're welcome to come and sit in and spy on us. But no, you're going to be out of the country. You're going to be like on this 3-week cruise. Yeah. But next week,
to the chat.
Alex Donovan, I think I have our schedule right. Alex Donovan's going to come talk to us about corporate chaplaincy. In the meantime, you can find us on our website. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.